Welcome back to my review channel, my loyal bunny booners. I know it's been a while. Things have just been really busy the past few months, but I'm so happy to be making book reviews again, and thank you all for being patient. This video is going to be for November and December, and then hopefully at the end of February, I will just do January and February. One of the delays is that my microphone broke, and my dear friend Kaya, very generously sent me a tripod so I could keep making these videos. Everybody should thank Kaya, and also go read her book, The Vampire from Retail. But without any further ado, let us get started. This is all the way back, again, November, December, so if I'm looking at my notes a lot, please forgive me. It has been like 4 months since I read any of these books. But the first book is called The Cabinet by Eunsoon Kim. This is a Korean translated book. It's about a Korean salaryman who feels like he's at a dead-end job, and he decides to explore his office, and he goes to the level above and he finds it completely empty except for a filing cabinet which is under lock and key. He gets obsessed with it, and he finally cracks the code, and he starts reading through these files, which basically keep track of people who have unexplained phenomena happening to them. It has people who can like eat glass, people who can eat steel without having any, illness or any issues from it, people who have like plant growths coming from them. So just people who have experienced strange phenomena. And he also meets a researcher who has been keeping track of all these files, and also who created like a helpline so people could call in and have their stuff recorded and also seek like comfort, because living with these phenomena can sometimes be really difficult. This is a super interesting read. It's very existentialist. It's kind of anti-capitalist, and it's very humorous. It's kind of like a dark humor. Anytime you have themes of like capitalism and existentialism, it's going to be a little dark. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really like the main character just being like, fuck it, I guess I'm damn doing this shit now. I gave this one a 4.2 out of 5. It's a short little read, it's eclectic, and it was very enjoyable. Next, we have one of the nominees for the 2024 Booker Prize. This is James by Percival Everett. This is a retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or Tom Sawyer, one of them, from the perspective of James, who is a runaway slave. He finds out that he is going to be separated from his family, so he plans to leave, go to a state where slaves are free, and then come back and buy his wife and child. And Percival Everett is just an incredible writer. It is such an intelligent, heartfelt read, and it's also so harrowing. I think anytime you have a story that is from the perspective of a slave, it really encapsulates the horror of slavery and racism, and that's something that is so important, and it's genuinely like terrifying. There are scenes in this book where if it was from, Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer's perspective, it'd be, lighthearted adventure. But from the perspective of a man who has everything to lose, no autonomy, it becomes terrifying. And you really root for him. You want to see him succeed. And having all these obstacles in his way, it's stressful. This is an incredible read. Sadly, it did not win the Booker Prize. I thought it was going to, but I'm pretty sure Percival Everett is already a decorated author, so he's probably not too upset about it. This was a 4.8 out of 5. It's really incredible, and I think it's like should be taught in schools, honestly. This is another very important book. I feel like with all the book bannings going on, this is a book that you definitely want to read before, you might not be able to. Next is another book that was nominated for the Booker Prize Award, and this is the title that won. It's Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This follows 6 astronauts from all over the world in a space station, and it's just kind of like a recording of their thoughts and feelings throughout their voyage. It's such a beautiful read. I think this is one of those books that really captures like the melancholy and the nostalgic feeling that like space gives humans, like the smallness that people experience when they see the Earth from, so far away. And, they see all these weather phenomenons happening. They can hear about the news, and they can see like it happening in real time all across the world. And it's really just a beautiful piece of literature. Um, that's kind of all I can say about it. The characters are all very sympathetic, and I really enjoy seeing their different perspectives. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. I definitely think it's worth checking out. All of the books that got nominated, the ones that I read, I think I read like 4 out of the 6. They were all really fantastic. Next is another one. This was my personal favorite from the nominees. It is The Safekeep by Yale van der Woden. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I believe it's a Dutch name. But this is a story about a woman named Isabel who lives in a house, her family's house. It is her brother technically owns it, but she's the one, her brother and her are very different. She's the one who's been taking care of it. She leads an incredibly disciplined life. She doesn't have any, no shenanigans for her. And then one day her brother invites his current girlfriend to go live in the house while he's out of town. And Isabel's life is kind of thrown into this chaos. She's not used to having another person around. She's very she's kind of mean. She's very cold, she lives her life very structured. And this person is quite the opposite. And their relationship is very rocky. And then things start getting, a little spooky. Things start going missing around the house. She kind of looks at this woman a little differently. And stuff happens. I don't want to give anything too away. This is historical fiction. The time period in Denmark, Dutch, Netherlands. I don't know. It sounds so stupid. The time period is very important, and when the mystery of the story is revealed, it is so hard-hitting. It is incredible. I could not put this piece down. I was thinking, what could it be? There are so many crumbs throughout the story that lead you to this reveal, and it is truly incredible. It was my favorite piece. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I absolutely adored this book. If you're a fan of historical fiction, I think you would really like it. There's also a romance aspect, which typically I'm not a fan of, but again, I gave this a 5 out of 5. It was spectacular. And that was The Safekeep. Next, we have the last... Sorry. I accidentally turned off my mic. Next, we have the last nominee that I read. It was called Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. This is a story about a spy who is infiltrating a eco-terrorist group, and her job is to basically expose them. And this is a really interesting book because the spy story, you hear it's a spy story and you think, oh, it's going to be a thriller action, and it's really not. It's very slow-paced, very philosophically driven book. And the main character, who her real name is never stated, she has such an interesting mindset, and the way she goes about things in the story is really intriguing. One of my favorite things from the story is she talks about when you wash away all the bullshit that people have, their deepest desires and their goals, the things that really drive them, that's the salt of a person, she says in the book. And I don't know, I really like that. I just like salt imagery, I guess. This is an interesting read. I think out of all the nominees that I read, this one would probably be the most decisive, in that it's just kind of strange. The plot is very I guess second to the character interactions, which I know some people aren't a big fan of, but I quite enjoyed it. I gave this one a 4.3 out of 5. That was Creation Lake. Next is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This is a story about a woman who is cataloging birds up in Greenland after some environmental catastrophe, which has basically wiped out most of the world's animal species. This is a really depressing book. It's so beautiful, but it is basically a book about the horrors of climate change. This is a horror story, and it kind of hits too close to home, especially because there are people who, deny that climate change exists because, dumping 1,000 tons of oil into the ocean could never have any negative effects on the planet. This was a 4.5 out of 5 for me. I kind of don't want to give anything away. The writing is beautiful. The environment that is described is beautiful. And it does put a sense of hope inside of me despite the depressing nature of the book. Again, that was Migrations and a 4.5 out of 5. Next, we have a really incredible book that I read with my friend. It's called The Lion Women of Tehran by Mariah Kamali. This is a story about two childhood friends who grow up in Iran before the Islamic Revolution, and their life takes them through it, and their friendship changes throughout. This story is so hard-hitting for me. Again, it's historical fiction. I adore historical fiction, and I especially adore historical fiction about countries like Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, because when you're an American, you are spoon-fed propaganda about the Middle East basically your whole life, and you don't really learn a lot about modern day, what it's like in the modern times for those countries, and you don't even learn about like the past 100 or 200 years. So basically just that they're like, yep, they were there, Mesopotamia, and then it moves on. So this was a really great historical fiction novel about the perspective of two women who have to grow up during this time and how their lives are different. For me, this story also perfectly demonstrates why it is so important to be part of social movements. The characters in the book kind of represent people when it comes to these movements. You have the people who don't care about it. They are benefiting so largely from the system as it works. They don't care. They view people who are trying to change it very hostilely, and they are actively working against those people. And then you have people like the main character, who is kind of in the middle. She is a supporter of the people who are trying to change things, but she herself is not really willing to put in a lot of effort. She's not willing to make any sacrifices, and she is comfortable with certain things in the system because they also benefit her, but she also experiences the negative effects. So she's like that middle ground type person. And then you have the friend of the character who is all the way on the other side. Everything is negatively affecting her. She cannot afford to not fight back. And I think in reality, we owe everything to the people who can't afford to not fight back. This is especially relevant in modern times where we have a government system that is incredibly oppressive to people like me, people like my friends. And I kind of owe everything to people who are fighting. And this is a book that really exemplifies that in a time, in a revolution that continues to negatively affect women specifically in that area of the world. So this is a really incredible book. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. That was The Lion Women of Tehran. And the last book for November is The White Book by one of my favorite authors of all time, Mrs. Han Kang. This is a story about a woman who is contemplating her life, and she's kind of reminiscing about things that are the color white. And she has an older sister who sadly died basically a few hours after she was born. And the main character of this story feels like she is living the life that her sister was meant to live, and this creates a feeling of melancholy and depression throughout her whole life. She feels kind of unstable because of this. This is a really, really interesting perspective that I kind of haven't ever seen be explored in books before. This idea when you have a sibling who died, either due to miscarriage or very, very young, and then you're the child after that, what your life might have been like if that person were still around, how your life might have been changed. And I relate pretty heavily to this book because I've had similar experiences. I think it's called like Rainbow Children, but that's me. It's just so lyrical and poignant. All of Han Kang's writing is really like melancholic. She's like an incredible master of evoking emotions through her works, and this is no exception. I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It's very thought-provoking and very elegantly written, like most of her works. And I think I mentioned it before, but she won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2024. So if you're watching this, Han Kang, I'm like your biggest fan. And that's all for November. All right, for December, the first book I read was, oh my God, The 7 Moons of Molly Elwido by Shahan. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Karuna Tilalaka. Okay. This story is set from the 70s to the 90s in Sri Lanka. during a time of really, really incredible uh, and devastating and violent political turmoil. Very, very difficult times in Sri Lanka. In this sorry, this story follows Molly, who is a photographer. He's a war photographer, and he is murdered. And he basically is sent to an afterlife, like a mystical afterlife, where he encounters all these different ghosts, and he is told he has 7 days and 7 nights to find out who killed him and basically get all of his worldly affairs in order. So the story is unraveling as you see why he was killed, how his life went, and what led him basically to create the person he is. And now he has the chance to finally get a little bit of closure after all of this. This book is so fucking good. I know my explanation was kind of like clumsy. This book is incredible. It blends historical fiction, which I love, and fantasy and like fantastical and folklore elements. This book is absolutely spectacular. The writing structure is unique. The characters are super interested. They're also super flawed. Like, these characters are not super likable, but the growth that they have throughout the story, the way that the mystery is kind of uncovered, is just spectacular. This is a 5.5. This is a slam dunk. This book is true. If you have the chance to read this book, I definitely recommend it. It's really, really good. Some of the topics are very, very heavy. Again, this is about political turmoil. There's a lot of death and harrowing scenes in this book, but it's just written so impactfully. It's so intriguing. I absolutely adored this book. Again, that was a 5 out of 5. Next, we have Mina's Matchbox by Yoko Ogawa. This is a Japanese book. This is a very cute story about a young girl who stays with her wealthy aunt's family while her mom, her newly single mom, is away at college. The mom is getting a degree because their father recently passed and they need to be able to support the family. So the daughter stays at her aunt's house for the summer, and this is basically just a recounting of that summer now as an adult. This is honestly just like a very cute story. I can't say much about it. It's not super unique. It doesn't have like any like unique sentence structure, but I really enjoyed the characters. They're all very like they're characters in the sense that they all are very distinct. They have different personalities, and it's kind of just like a cute little cozy book. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5. It's also pretty short from what I remember, so you can get it done in one sitting. This is definitely like a cozy, wintry book, so I'm glad I read it in December. Next, we have a book that like I still think about all the time. It's called Pearl by Sion Hughes. This is a story about a young woman named Marianne who is kind of battling lifelong depression after losing her mom when she is a child. And when I say losing, I mean that literally the mom went missing one day and she was never found. And Marianne has been struggling to deal with this fact for her whole life because she's not sure if her mom is dead, if her mom just like ran away somewhere, and that, you know, not getting that closure has been really affecting her. And she finds this mid-century or medieval poem called Pearl, and she starts reading it and translating it, and she realizes it kind of mirrors her situation. And it's just such a intimate and elegant portrait of this person's life. It takes you from her childhood to her adulthood until she eventually has children of her own. And the grieving process that she goes through is so realistic and poignant. And oh my God, sorry, my lights just flickered. And just beautiful. The last few pages of this book stick with me so hard. Like, I just think about those last few pages all the time. Like, this whole book, it's like my heart is hurting for these characters, and then the last few books just fucking punch you in the heart and make it explode. Like, I cried. It's really a beautiful story. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. It's very slow. It's not super, plot heavy. Nothing exciting really happens in this book. But if you like character narratives, this is definitely a book that you would like. I kind of think of books like these as like basically just intimate portraits of characters, and I really like that. So far, my favorite genres are like historical fiction and then these very like quiet character driven stories. I really liked it. It's very beautiful. I think about it all the time. And that was Pearl. Next, we have The Fisherman by Chigozie Ibomia. He is a Nigerian writer, and the story follows Ben, who I think is the second youngest of 4 or 5 siblings, and their lives are torn apart when they receive a very ominous prophecy from a madman in town who they at least believe that his words are prophetical, and it kind of is the driving point that drives this family apart, specifically the brothers. This story had me literally hooked from the very beginning, which is, appropriate because it's called The Fisherman. It's so devastating. It's one of those books that it is so exciting to me when books are able to make you gasp or have a physical reaction. And this is one of those books where I definitely had a physical reaction. I could not put it down. The writing is immaculate. I am so excited to read more of Chigozie Ibomia's books. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. This is a slam dunk of a book. And you are sure to enjoy it. Again, a little bit of historical fiction in there. So it was really great. I love it. Devastating, depressing, scary. Scary in a non-horror way. If you don't like horror, I don't want you to be like, oh, I don't want to read it. It's realistic scary. And that was The Fisherman. Next, we have Love in the New Millennium by Kan Zhu. This is a love story that has the backdrop of the sex industry in China, and it kind of has an all-around theme of being yourself and being able to return to the place where you most feel at home. And I had a really hard time connecting to this book. I don't know if it was maybe the translation or if it was just didn't fit into English, but I was very confused while reading this book. But I still enjoyed it. It has a really cool sentence structure where each chapter is kind of from a different character's perspective, but they're all linked to each other somehow. So you're able to draw through lines throughout the story. This might be a book I return to in the future, maybe if I'm able to get a better translation, or maybe I didn't get it. But I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I still thought that it was unique and I enjoyed reading it. I don't want to discount it just because maybe I didn't understand it. But yeah, this was a 3.5 for me. Next, sorry. Sometimes I look at my list and I see a book that I really loved it. I'm like, yay! Next, we have Dead End Memories by Banana Yoshimoto. This is a story. It's really a collection of stories about different women who are recovering from very traumatic life experiences. Being one of them is cheated on. She has her relationship ended. One of them, I believe, is recovering from is grieving. And another story, a woman is almost murdered by one of her coworkers. So all different traumatic or life-changing events. And Banana Yoshimoto, once again, I think I've read 2 of her other books, and she's just so good at capturing the feelings of grief, capturing the experiences that trauma has on people, that it is, long-standing pain that is inside, that you feel it in your bones, you feel it in your heart for a really long time. And she is really, really great at capturing those experiences. She's just such an incredible author. I feel like she is so intelligent, and being able to write these stories in a way that evokes a warming emotion because you have such sympathy for these characters, and then you're also put at ease because you might relate your own life experiences to them. It's just incredible to me. She's an incredible author. Definitely check out Banana Yoshimoto's other stories. She's a very special writer to me, and I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. All right, a few more for December. Next, we have The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. This is a story about a family, a mother and a father, and 3 children who live completely secluded from society in a perfect home that is supposed to protect them from the toxicity of regular human life. This is a very, very weird and deeply uncomfortable story. It makes you question the reliability of all the different narrators in the story. The catalyst for the story is that one day the father goes missing. he is known to make these trips where he goes out to the mainland to collect supplies. He's usually gone for 3 days at a time, but one day he just does not come back. And so this family is trying to adjust, and you read the story from the three sisters' perspectives, and it's just so fucking creepy. And you're thinking, like, why are they secluded? Are these parents just controlling their children? Have they been lying to them? Like, what does the mainland look like? And you're never really told. And so you have all these questions, and kind of none of them are really answered. And I'm fine with that. I really enjoyed this book. The last 30 pages of this book gave me like anxiety. Like, I could literally, like, sometimes when I have to give like a presentation, I'm not like a nervous speaker, but I'll feel my heartbeat faster. And that is what it was like reading like the last part of this book. My heart was beating a mile a minute. Something I can compare this book to is a movie called Dogtooth, which, if you've seen it, you kind of know what I'm talking about. The movie is about a family who secludes their children, and the father is the main one's educating them, and he's basically bullshitting to them. Like, he will say, like, dogs are evil and toxic. If you ever see a dog in the yard, you have to kill it or else it'll poison you. So it's kind of got like that vibe, but very weird. And you might not be totally satisfied with that. But if you're okay with it and you want to read a funky little weird book, I gave this one a 4.2 out of 5. Next, we have The Factory by Hiroko Oyedama. And this is a story about 3 different factory workers all living very different lives, and they all work very different jobs at this factory. And they start to kind of lose their sense of reality and their sense of personhood as they work these kind of strange and very meaningless jobs. And when I say meaningless, I'm not saying that in like a demeaning way, like your job is stupid, but in the sense that like they're told to catalog things, and the things they're cataloging are like not real, like just like they don't exist. It's like very weird, and it's very humorous and kind of creepy. Like, it's very, also the writing style is super like claustrophobic, like small text that's very close together, so kind of adds to that feeling of unease, and like you're losing yourself in the pages of this book, much like the characters are losing themselves. It was a little hard to follow at first because, that derealization, when you put it into words, it can be confusing to read. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5. This is also a super short book. If I remember, it was like under 150 pages. So it's pretty easy to read in one setting. And I think a lot of people will like this book. It's pretty funny. But again, it can be kind of tedious to read just because of the way that it's written. But, to each their own. And I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5. Oh my God. And last but not least, for the month of December, we have Minor Detail by Adania Shiori. This is a story about a woman who is obsessing over the rape and murder of a Palestinian girl over like 80 years ago. And she becomes obsessed with uncovering the story. And it kind of cost her a lot of things that she wasn't expecting to. This book was haunting to read. It was so deeply upsetting, and the writing is so precise and it hits you hard. This book does not waste any of the words that are written in it. It really, really illustrates the erasure of Palestinian history, which, if you've been alive for literally for like the past 100 years, if you've ever been alive, especially in the past few years, you know what's going on in that area. And this story really illustrates that the minor details, much like the title of history, matter. It is so important to hold on to those details and make sure that they don't get erased. And the main character in the story, seeing her lose so much to preserve those details is really depressing. And I think it also, like I said earlier, it's so important for us to be a part of social movements and be aware of what is going on in the world, because we don't know if in 100 years or 200 years the history books will have forgotten about us, and that's like a really scary and terrifying thing to think about. And I really don't want that to happen. And I don't think the Palestinian people don't deserve what is happening to them. And that is a wrap up. I gave that one a 4.5 out of 5. That is it for November and December. Hopefully by the end of February, I will be able to crank out another video recapping January and February. Yeah. Thank you all for supporting me so much. I love reading. Reading. Bye.